Hello, Veda Warrior community. My name is Smrita Chaube. I'm the founder of Veda Warrior. It's great to be with all of you here today, and we are going to be sitting down for another masterclass series on an introduction to trauma and the power of food as medicine with Angela Glaz, who's here with us today. She's one of our master teachers, and Angela is an Ayurvedic practitioner, a trauma specialist, a mindset coach, and the founder of Eka Veda Life. She's super passionate about holistic health, intuitive healing, and how we can navigate these super troubling times that we find ourselves in 2021 as a collective. So in addition to working one-on-one with her clients, Angela has also created a fantastic series of online courses to help you learn about the power of Ayurveda. And she also is the host of the amazing Sattvic State podcast, where she deep dives into a number of different topics around holistic health. So thank you so much, Angela, for being with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm super excited to get started on our conversation. As we know, America is facing a mental health pandemic, which we were already facing prior to COVID actually hitting us. Over 60% of Americans reported feeling chronically stressed. And of course, when we take the Eastern healing approach, we know that chronic stress leads to disease. So it's really not just about your stress, but about managing your overall health. So before we back into that discussion on holistic healing, Angela, I'd love to hear a little bit more from you about your background and how your personal journey led you to yoga and Ayurveda.
Yeah. So I'm always trying to make this short and sweet, as sweet as possible. But so I was actually diagnosed with depression at a very long age due to trauma. So right away I was given, medication for my depression. I also had lower back issues, which I know now were actually connected to my a big piece of it was my mental health as well. So I suffered through that, never really talked about it most of my life because this was also 30 some years ago, which people didn't really talk about depression or mental health as much as they're starting to now. So I dealt with it, made it through high school, got to college, and things actually got way worse because you add alcohol, additional stress, lack of sleep to the mix. And I was a miserable human being. I just felt like angry at everybody. I was really cynical. Anyone that was happy, I didn't understand why. So there was, that early 20s angst added on top of everything else. And so some way, somehow, someone talked me into going to a yoga class, and I went, and I actually hated it. It was like the worst thing ever for me because I was not comfortable in my body. It was the first time I was left alone with my thoughts, right? And I had to like deal with myself. So it was really challenging. But I was also a poor college student and I had bought a package. So I was determined to get my money's worth. So I kept going back and taking those yoga classes. And then I started to notice that my insomnia wasn't as bad. I started to notice that my lower back was feeling better. So I kept going. And it wasn't because it was like a popular thing. This was also when I was going, this was over 15 years ago in Wisconsin, like in a small town. So like you're like a crazy hippie if you're going to yoga back then. So I kept going. And then at one point, I think I was taking classes for about a year. One of the teachers asked me if I wanted to teach. And so they didn't do any certifications. They just kind of did this little training through the college gym. And I trained to become a yoga teacher there. And then I remember when they asked me to, I literally looked around like, is that person talking to me? Because I've never been like a fit person. Like that just wasn't it wasn't in my nature. So I was really surprised, but I said yes. And I did the training. I started teaching, and I was mainly teaching, like the football team, the basketball team, and then anyone else that was like going to the gym. And one weekend, the gym, like the program that I was teaching through, they offered some continuing education. So they had one of the professors who was, I think she was like philosophy studies or something. She came to work with us and she talked to us about yoga, and she shared more about, the philosophical standpoint. She talked a little bit about Ayurveda, which I had never heard of in my life. All I knew were these yoga postures, and it just blew my mind. So I was so inspired by her talk that a couple of years later, I ended up going to India and I trained in yoga. And then I learned more about Ayurveda, and then meeting with an actual Ayurvedic doctor there. He saved my gut health. He helped fix my back, just fixing the way that I was eating at the time, which again, back then it was like, to be healthy and skinny, you drank Diet Coke and you ate salads, which was destroying my insides, which was then destroying like my mental health because my digestion wasn't working properly. So he helped me fix my digestion, and then just everything snowballed from there. I was really intrigued by Ayurveda, and when I came home, I feel like the internet even wasn't what it was today. So I had to like go to the library to find books, and I started to read more and more about it, and I eventually went to Kerala Ayurveda and became a counselor, and I've just been doing continuing education ever since, and it's changed my entire life and my well-being. So
Well, thank you so much for sharing that personal story. And I think that is so beautiful how this journey really unfolded for you, which is that, you kind of had both a mental health and a physical health breakdown in the beginning. That process then led you to learn more about Ayurveda. And I loved what you said about the fact that, you hadn't even heard of this before. And I think that's one of the great challenges we're trying to solve at Veda Warrior, is to prevent people from having to do exactly what you had to do, which is that once you did learn about it, there was no information about it in the West once you came back home. And then you had to do this very deep dive of education on your own. So it's really nice that the world is evolving a little bit. And more people are learning that yoga is actually one of three sciences, one of three sister sciences from the Vedic period, or the Vedas, for ancient texts. So there's yoga, meditation, and Ayurveda. So what yoga is to mental health, exercise, overall well-being, meditation is to the power of the mind, and Ayurveda is to medicine. And so this power of bringing the medicinal aspect of yoga to America in a simplified format is something we're super, super passionate about here at Veda Warrior. And to bring this into a little bit more of a practical perspective, 2020 was a very tough year from a mental health perspective. And some of the problems that you were noting, which may have been a little bit more fringe in the past, like nobody wanted to mention that they had mental health problems, and there was all this stigma around it. The beautiful thing is there's no longer any stigma around mental health. Whether you're a marathon runner or someone who's taking antidepressants every day, mental health is on everybody's mind. So, one of the silver linings of COVID is that now everyone has anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
And so we can finally talk about it and just get rid of all the stigma around it. So based on your work as a practitioner, and you see so many different patients on a day-to-day basis, what have you seen are some of the greatest mental health symptoms that have kind of occurred in 2020, and what is your outlook for 2021?
I'm like trying to again see how I can condense this because it's so much. I think people have really become more aware of themselves, and I think for some people that has been very enlightening, right? But for some people, kind of like when I shared my first yoga class, like I'm like, what is happening, right? For some people, they're breaking down because they're left alone with themselves and their thoughts, and because we used to live in more of a society that was very vata and pitta, so there's this go go go, do. Now we're forced to stop, we're forced to see ourselves, we're forced to reflect. That can be very scary and trigger a lot of things within us that may make us act or behave in ways that we haven't before. So really, I'm going to just check my notes here because I made some notes on this and I want to make sure I'm hitting everything. So I also think that, with our time that we've had in this pandemic to stop and think, we are still in not only a pandemic, but we are in the information age, right? So there's so much information that we have access to. And if we actually go into the mindset stuff a little bit, our unconscious mind takes in, and I'm spitballing here, but it's about 23 billion bits of information per second. That is a lot of information, and our conscious mind only takes in like 123 bits per second. So, regardless if we're taking in this information consciously or unconsciously, our system is being overwhelmed with information. And if we don't have the awareness or the tools to mentally digest all of this information, that's when we start to see those mental health issues. That's when we start to see the stress. And really, stress is our biggest mental health issue. And you obviously know this with Veda Warrior and your product. But stress is like, it's like the mothership for everything else, because with stress, there's anxiety, there's depression, and all of those other things. But a lot of it starts with stress. So if we're able to become aware of that and what it looks like in our unique body, which again, that's what you guys try to teach, we have the tools to take care of ourselves in our unique body so that we can live our best lives and we can move forward and do things in a more productive and healthful way.
That is the best quote ever, that the stress is like the mothership of all of the ailments or all of the imbalances, so to speak. And that's really one of the beautiful things that I love about Ayurveda, is that it tells us that the root of all things is our mind. So when the mind, body, and spirit are not aligned, then that creates the energetic imbalance that then leads to all these diseases. And to your point, I think you made some extremely interesting points about information and how much information overload we're getting. And in fact, I would go as far as to say that we're living in an information warfare age. So I think people's minds are actually starting to glitch right now because there's so much information. Then you read something, 10 minutes later, you realize it's fake news. So nobody even knows what's real anymore. So this is creating a mental health breakdown, the likes of which I don't think we've seen in modern society. At least in past years, everybody had a more or less shared vision of what reality is. Now we just don't know. We have no idea what's actually happening in the world and what's fake news, what's not fake news. And, we're all busy. We all have jobs. We don't have time to spend 30 minutes of research on every article that comes up. And so I know from speaking to a lot of our community members that people are finding this very stressful. It's almost this dystopian feeling of like, I don't even know what reality is anymore. And so that is actually creating a lot of trauma. And so one of the things I've realized is that trauma is something in the past we may have thought of as this very extreme thing, right? Like abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, or something catastrophic. That's what I at least used to associate this word trauma with. But what I didn't realize, and I've recently started learning, is that there are so many different forms of trauma. And, Veda Warrior, we take a super personalized approach to mental health. Obviously, every individual is totally unique. So I personally spend quite a bit of time speaking to our subscribers and our community members. And one of the great things that I'm noticing, and people are starting to self-diagnose, is everybody feels like they have PTSD from the experiences that we've just been through, and a lot of anxiety about what's to come. So since you're a trauma specialist, I would love to pick your brain on this topic a little bit. If you could just talk to us about how to think about trauma and how do we even know if we are traumatized? Like, how do we self-diagnose?
Yeah. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that is so true. A lot of people don't realize that they're in a state of trauma or that they have gone through trauma unless it's something massive. And one way that my teacher taught this too was like, there is PTSD, but there's also PTS. So it's like when you are in this current state of stress, right? You're in this you're in your current state of stress. So really what happens when we are in this state of stress, and especially during this pandemic, we have gone into survival mode. A lot of us have shifted into what is called our reptilian brain. So there are three parts of the brain. There's reptilian, mammalian, and the thinking brain. And so when we start to lose our jobs, or we're scared that we're going to lose our jobs, when we lose our jobs and we think we're going to lose our house, or we can't pay for food, or just everything that comes along with it. When our core system is taken away, right? Even our friends and our family, we're losing those in-person connections. That's part of our survival, is connection. So we shift into the reptilian brain. And what happens is when we get into this part of the brain, our prefrontal cortex is like shifting off. And so this is our thinking part of our brain. This is the part that makes rational decisions. This is the part that can strategize. This is the part that can plan. So we're losing all of that. And this is also, it's like we get crazy a little bit, right? We're literally in survival mode. And I'm sorry, I just still have these images of last week, Monday, just, in DC. Like, I feel like those people were also in, even if we don't agree with what was happening, they're in survival mode because something has been taken away from them, right? So this is what they feel like they need to do. Their reptilian brain is telling them this is what needs to happen for them to survive. So when this happens too, we don't always know it. So there's a few things that we can look at to see when we are experiencing post PTSD or PTS, right? When we are in the reptilian brain. And one is just general fogginess within the brain, or like our memory not working quite so good. And I know I've run into so many people that are experiencing this. They're just like, sorry, I'm feeling a little spacey, I can't focus. Or last week, I had a lot of cancellations, and somewhere like people just forgot. They forgot about their appointments, even though they don't have like anything else to do, right? There's just this, they start to forget. And then there's also fatigue. And I think that can be equated with people are like, oh my gosh, do I have COVID? But it's also, it's not COVID. It's literally our mental health playing tricks on our body. So we start to feel mentally and physically fatigued. Also being impulsive, emotional. And this can look like, what last Monday looked like, right? Being impulsive and emotional, but it can also look like shopping online, right? We might be impulsive and just be like, I want this, especially we're scrolling Instagram. I know that I've been sold on I'm like, okay, I totally need these pants, Instagram. And I wouldn't have normally bought those. And it looks like also sometimes neglecting our basic needs. And for everyone, this might be a little different, but perhaps say you were someone that made your bed every day. You stopped making your bed. Perhaps you skip brushing your teeth before you go to bed, or you're like, I'm not going to shower today. What's the point? Right? So we start to neglect these things that naturally make us feel good, right? These rhythms and routines. So it's nothing big. It's nothing, right, dramatic, but there's these little things that show us that we are in a state of trauma. We are in that reptilian brain. And really how we can move back into our logical brain or retrain the reptilian brain is we need to create new habits for ourselves. And this is hard, right? This is like no easy task, because our reptilian brain loves habits, because it believes we need whatever habits we currently have to survive. So bringing in new habits, it's going to resist. It's going to feel really hard. So for example, that eating maybe like a veggie omelet is way better than eating a donut for breakfast, but you've been eating a donut for breakfast every day for like the last 3 months. So it's going, even though it's not that hard to do, like you're like, oh, I can totally do this, I have the time, your brain is going to be so resistant. So it's like you really have to push to start making these changes, and whatever changes they are. But I think the first step here is to realize that you are in a state of trauma, that you are stuck in the reptilian brain through those pieces of information I just listed.
That is such an amazing explanation of the different parts of the brain and how they work. And the symptoms that you've noted have been coming up across most of our subscriber base. So lack of focus, low energy, a lot of big existential questions like what's the point of life, having this routine like being thoroughly disrupted. So many of our customers, for example, are working moms. Working moms are some of the people that were challenged the most in the pandemic, because all of a sudden you're taking care of children and you're also taking care of your actual job. And and I don't just mean to say moms, dads as well, parents in general. So these are some of the things that a lot of people are feeling. And to your point, not everybody is realizing that this is a form of trauma, and we really do need to take some approaches, some different strategies to try to fix this, even though we might resist them. I think one of the interesting things about trauma is that we also, as we've been discussing, don't always know that they're there. And therefore, one of the beautiful things that you do is intuitive healing. So I would love if you could help us understand what is intuitive healing and how do you use that modality to work with your clients?
Yeah, it's funny because it's not something I market. Um, I I try to stay mostly science-based, but I definitely do have a lot of that woo within me. So I think I've had an intuitive nature since I was a kid. Like, I mean, I could go into a lot of stories, but I have had a lot of interesting things happen to me when I was a kid. And I also think that is part of what kind of triggered my depression, because no one believed me. And I mean, in addition to other things, but it's just like this, I have this sense of knowing. And I also, to discover or to tap into this a little more, I actually studied with a shaman too, so she could help me better understand and use all of these things I was experiencing so that I was not afraid, and so I could use them to help people. So a lot of times I don't market it, I just kind of secretly throw it in there. Not like I'm like casting a spell on anyone or anything, but I just use it to help my clients pull out the things that they're hiding or they're having a hard time articulating. So I just essentially it's your intuition, right? I just know how to read people, and that also has come with time of observing people and working with people through yoga and through my consults, right? There'll be times where I can just like see in them there's a question they want to ask or there's something that they want to say, but they don't know how to articulate it. So I tend to help them articulate that or pull that out. I've had many clients say that I read their minds, and I don't like, it's not like, I'm not trying to be invasive. I'm just pulling out what they are thinking and they're trying to say, but they don't know how to do it. I actually when I did go to college, I actually went to school to be an elementary teacher. And so when I worked with kids, they also called me a psychic, because like I always knew when they were like picking their nose or like doing something bad. And like, how'd you know? And I was like, I know. So yeah, it's really that's what I use my intuitive healing for. If someone asks upon request, there are some shamanic things like rituals that I will do with people so I can help them what is called journeying, which is helping them go inward a little more. And those existential questions that you were saying people are asking, I will help them discover that through shamanic journeying, which is just like a really deep meditation. We don't use, I know a lot of people are really into, ayahuasca, or I don't do any of that. I'm not certified to guide anyone through that, but we do it just through deep meditation. I'll also do like cleansings if people feel like they need to rid themselves of anything that's feeling stuck or stagnant. And, food, exercise, the physical things aren't doing the trick. I will do what I learned from my shaman to help clear that energy.
Amazing. So in other words, you're using the science of intuition to help you better understand the needs of your clients and help them in this process of kind of going inward to understand, because it really relates back to what we were saying about trauma. If you're not aware that you're experiencing trauma, then it's very hard to actually solve that problem. And I love that you brought up this duality we have between woo-woo and science-backed. And at Veda Warrior, we are so passionate about bridging that gap because Ayurveda has received the same backlash in the West in the last couple of decades, in that it's viewed as woo-woo. And we really don't, we want to basically dispel that notion. Like, Ayurveda is backed by science. It has been used for over 5,000 years. It has withstood the test of time. And specifically, you know, we were talking about the information wars. What do you do about healthcare when you can't really believe anyone? Well, like, let's look at what's been working in history. So, you know, things don't get done again and again and again for 5,000 continuous years without stopping if it doesn't work, especially from like a healthcare perspective, right? So, like, in the next millennia, we're going to know that many of these pharmaceutical drugs didn't actually work. Many of the anxiety medications that are out there, some people have been taking them for 10 years, they still have anxiety. So they're starting to ask, wait a minute, I thought taking this pill every day was going to cure my anxiety, and here I am a decade later, and all the problems still persist. So I love kind of towing this line between the woo-woo and the scientific, and I really fundamentally believe that all of these things do have science behind them. And what you're talking about with intuitive healing is one of the cornerstones of Ayurvedic medicine, which is around using the power of intuition to deeply understand and to trust your own thoughts, beliefs. And it's really helping you guide you onto this path of also self-healing. I think if we don't know what we're going through ourselves, nobody can really help us. And that's why I loved what you said, that you're using your intuition to kind of pull those things out of your clients, because sometimes things are buried in our subconscious and we're not totally aware that's even happening. Or, you know, we're still struggling with some stigma around actually being open about the things that we're dealing with. And I think right now, in this moment in time, people are really starting to be open to, how can I create a new way of dealing with my mental health that works in the long run? So these new concepts are exactly what we want to be talking about, educating people about, teaching about, just so we can have a completely rounded out discussion of what are the solutions for mental health that are available to humanity. Prescription drugs are definitely one approach. It's valid. We're absolutely not judging anyone. But we think that there's been a little bit of a downplaying of the holistic things that we really want to round out that conversation. So thank you so much for your insights there.
Yeah, and thank you too for all that you do. And I think, like you said, I say the woo-woo, but there is a lot of science that backs intuition and stuff up. Right now, I don't have that. I mean, I'm sure I could find that information, but again, information overload. I haven't went down that path yet, but yeah, there is definitely the science to back it up with. I think quantum physics has done a lot with energy and intuition. So
That's exactly right. And then a lot of people are really getting interested in metaphysics these days. That is basically the science of consciousness, or the science of intuition. What I find most compelling about Ayurveda actually is that it's actually super futuristic. It's talking about quantum physics. It's talking about energy. It's very different from Western medicine in that it's an energy-based healing system. And to think that they figured this out so long ago, and these things still work and still resonate with us today, and it still applies to the human body, is super shocking. So one of my favorite doctors who's doing a lot of research on this topic is Dr. Joe Dispenza. To all of our community members who are listening, if you want to find out a little bit more, that's a great resource. And we're going to be doing a lot more work to talk about some of the science behind this as well, because we really want people to understand this is not woo-woo. There is a lot of philosophy, science, tradition around all of these holistic healing practices. And I think the time is now to kind of figure them out, because it looks like our next couple of years are going to continue to be a little bit challenging. So to that point, you know, I think one of the things that people don't always understand is the power of diet. And I loved one of the things you said earlier when you were chatting about your personal journey. I know I definitely did this as well, but for many years, my focus of my diet was to be skinny. It had no bearing on my actual health. And I had zero knowledge of the fact that what I was eating was directly impacting my mood, my anxiety, my tendencies towards depression. All of these were interconnected. So I would love your help to demystify this for our community members a little bit. How does our diet actually impact our food? And how do the three different stress types or doshas, vata, pitta, kapha, how do they react to stress, and how can food be a tool for them?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is our digestion. So conventional nutrition says we are what we eat. Ayurvedic nutrition says we are what we digest. And so our digestion is huge. And when I conduct Ayurvedic consultations, one of the first things we actually look at is digestion. So a lot of times when you do an Ayurvedic, not a lot of times, but all of the time, when you do an Ayurvedic consultation, right, you are looking for the imbalances, the root cause of the imbalance, whatever that person is currently suffering from. But before we even get to that root cause, we actually have to look at their digestion first, because usually under that root cause is another root cause in the digestion. So when we are able to properly digest and assimilate the foods that we consume, that's when we are building up what is called prana, which is our life force, which makes us happy and healthy, but it's like making all of the systems in our body work in an optimal way. It's nurturing our skin, our bones, our tissues, everything. So when we eat for our body type, right? And this is going to be different for everybody. And this is such a hard thing to talk about on a broad spectrum, because again, everybody is so unique. So how we need to deal with this is going to be so different. And what it really boils down to is that self-awareness, right? How do you feel when you are eating? Are you able to properly digest your food? And if we're really looking at healthy digestion, because a lot of people don't know what that is, that means that we have bowel movements 1 to 2 times a day. And ideally, I know people don't want to talk about this, but your bowel movement should look like a ripe banana. That is a healthy bowel movement. So we need to have that proper digestion. We need to make sure that we are eliminating gas and bloating. We're eliminating diarrhea. We want to essentially, when our belly is happy, right? A happy belly is a happy us. And I'm trying to think about how else to explain this according to the doshas. I guess there's a few rules of thumb that you can follow when it comes to an Ayurvedic lifestyle without getting too much into the particular foods for each dosha or stress type. And one rule that you can follow is to be mindful about where you are eating and the company with whom you are eating. So that might look like don't eat in front of the TV. Don't eat while you're working at your desk. Maybe you had a fight with your partner and you're all tense and stressed out, right? And then you're eating. And what's happening, right? If your body is tensing up, everything's tensing up. So you're constricting the process of digestion. So you want to make sure that you are in a happy state. Ayurveda says the way our food is cooked makes a big impression on how we digest it. So we should be cooking with love, or whoever is cooking our food should be cooking it with love, right? So it's that energetic feel. Also, the process paid, or the attention paid to the process of eating. So just simply making sure that when you are eating, you're chewing your food. Also, the liquids that you consume while you are eating is really important, because too much liquid can put out our digestive fire. So if you are drinking, ideally, room temperature water, you should be just taking little sips throughout your meal, making sure you're not slamming water before or after your meal, as that's going to put out that digestive fire. I feel like I have one more tip for you, but I can't think of it. I think that's a good start. I feel like that can be a lot for people to begin with. But the end all be all here is paying attention to your belly and your digestion and what is happening there. How are those foods that you are consuming making you feel? Paying attention to how you are eating and the company that you are eating with.
So that was so interesting what you just said, because it's really about putting the power back in the hands of the individual. So often we're like, oh no, I have to wait until I talk to a specialist. But you should actually be checking in with your own body all day, every day, and starting to think like, oh yeah, I had this huge steak. How did I feel after that? And starting to be mindful of this. And I will definitely say that it took me years before I got to that place on my own. For example, I used to have a salad every single day for lunch, and every single day, 2 hours later, my stomach would be hurting. Because I'm a classic pitta, and I should have been eating something else with my salad. I should not have only been having the salad because of the energy of my digestion that I have. And it took me so long to figure out that I should not be doing that because I wasn't checking in with my body. I knew that I was feeling my stomach was hurting, but all I cared about was being skinny. And so that's what you do. You have a salad. And then once I really deep dived into my Ayurvedic practice with an Ayurvedic doctor, that's the first thing she got rid of. She's like, no, you can't do that. There's a reason that doesn't make you feel good. And the fact that you've been doing it so long without ever connecting the dots there is interesting. So I think that's a huge shift, right? We're all so busy. We were all used to living in the rat race. For me, I live in New York City. Lifestyle here is very frantic. So you're not necessarily having even the mind share to ask yourself, like, am I doing okay? And I think that is one of the silver linings of the pandemic, where we have this time. We're all at home. We're not rushing around and commuting for the most part. And these are some of the powerful tools that can really help us manage our mental health in the long run. So I loved what you said about being very mindful about what you're eating, trying to not eat in front of the screen, taking small sips of water instead of like pounding water before and after. And what about eating seasonally? What is the power of eating in concert with the seasons? Like, is that something that we should be thinking about?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the doshas so people have a background if they are new to Ayurveda. So the three stress types, the three doshas are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Vata is Vata is air and space. Pitta is fire and water, and Kapha is earth and water. So each of these doshas actually correlate to the season. So for example, Vata, which is air and space, correlates to the fall season in the northern hemisphere. So if you think about the elements that Vata is, it's air and space. So it's this mobile energy. Air can be cold, mobile, dry, and that's what we see more of in the fall. So what happens is during each season, we end up seeing more of these elements in our own constitution. So no matter what your unique constitution is, we can all experience more of these imbalances of a particular dosha during a certain season. So during fall, when we see more air and space, the dry, the cold, that mobile energy, we might see that in our skin and our nails. We might see, our hands might be cold, our skin might be dry, our hair might be dry. And that also means it affects our digestion. So our digestion can get a little more turbulent. It can experience more air, which causes bloating or gas. More of that dry quality can cause constipation. So what's really nice, though, is that nature naturally provides these foods that we are supposed to eat to balance these imbalances that our body experiences. So if we need to balance out excess movement, we want to move to root vegetables, right? Like carrots, potatoes, beets, or squashes. Squashes? I don't know if that's how you say it, plural, squash or squashes. But these are all really nice grounding foods that are going to help balance that mobile energy. And most of us don't eat like beets raw or squash raw, right? So naturally, nature is telling us to cook these things and to cook them with oil. So they're going to be really warm and grounding, which is going to help our digestive system naturally digest those foods. So our body is taking in what we need to function optimally and then releasing or letting go of whatever is not serving us. So there's no buildup of toxins, which leads to additional imbalances or diseases.
So bottom line is we're very much affected by our environments, and all of us are energy. So Ayurveda, as I keep saying, is an energy-based healing system. It really believes that all of the cosmos are energy made out of 5 building blocks, the elements that you were just describing: fire, water, air, space, earth. So the same elements that are outside in our environment are what's also inside our body. So when the seasons change, our entire energetic balance with our surroundings is also fluctuating over time. So this is really the power of Ayurveda, where it goes down to personalization to the environment within which you're living. So someone in December in Hawaii should be eating something very different from someone in December in Seattle. And it's all relating to this concept of energy. So these are some of the beautiful tips that Ayurveda has for us. But, when it comes to diet, one of the big things is it's very hard to stick to these changes in the long run. And that's why I really loved what you were teaching us earlier about the reptilian brain and your habits. So if your habits are eating unhealthy food, it's super, super tough to get out of it, especially for some of our kapha customers. Right now, kapha, for a lot of kapha, stress eating is something that they experience quite often. Typically, when you're stress eating, it's comfort food of some sort. And because we've been stressed for so long, a lot of people have developed habits around comfort eating. And this is something I struggled with as well. I know that there were some days in 2020 when I was so stressed out that all I was craving was Taco Bell or a donut. And it was like this war in my mind of like, don't do it. No, but I really want it. So, those moments are challenging, but creating a long-term diet change is difficult. So what are some of the ways you work with your clients to help them really create a meaningful change that's lasting over time? Because at the end of the day, this is a lifestyle. It's not about eating healthy one day. It's not about like, oh, yay, today I did it, now I'm done. It's about creating habits, long-lasting habits for the future.
Yeah. So this is a great question. And this is actually one of the reasons I have done so much continuing education in mindset and trauma and all of that, is because I was doing Ayurvedic consultations. And I feel like, I have a background in education. Like I love teaching. I feel like I'm very good at it. I'm very good at breaking things down and simplifying things. And so I'm giving my clients these recommendations to make their lives so much better, and they're not hard at all. And there was so much resistance to it. And I'm like, what is going on? So, I do feedback after all of my consultations. And after about a year or so of gathering feedback, I was like, oh, it's the mind. Of course, it's the mind. So I started to do more continuing education there. And then I've actually created a program called Sattva. And in Sanskrit, Sattva is our joy, our contentment, our peace. And the program is intended to help people get out of their reptilian brain and build those new habits. So I created a 5-week program that teaches people about all of their minds. And we use REBT, which is rational emotive behavioral therapy, as well as NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming, EFT, which is emotional freedom technique. So it's a little more energetic work. But we use all of these modalities under the modality of Ayurveda. So people really get to know themselves, their mindset type, their body type, and kind of where they are stuck. And we create these new patterns, these new neural pathways in their mind so that they can walk away with habits that are going to better serve them. And so really through the program, we focus on one thing at a time. So we're spending 5 weeks working on one thing, but how I've created it is they have access to a portal that has, videos and workbooks that allow them to go back and redo that for anything else that they want to change. So we walk through one big thing together so they really know how to do it and create those changes. And then my support, I offer a group version of this as well as individual. But I love the group program because the group program is really nice because you're learning from other people. And a lot of times, the teacher can teach in one way, but you're going to learn so much more from your classmates and other questions that they have that you might not have had. So it's a really cool program. And it's been really fun to watch people cultivate these amazing transformations just by they're cultivating self-awareness and gaining access to some tools that they haven't had before.
So this is exactly why we're so honored to be working with you and to have you on board as one of our Veda Warrior master teachers. And it's exactly what you said. The way you speak is so simple. And Ayurveda is such a massive concept that really the challenge we face right now is how do we simplify it so that people can make practical changes in their everyday life. And what you just talked about is the essence of Ayurveda. It's not just about flooding somebody's inbox with recipes. It's about helping them change their mindset so that they want to use those recipes. So like we all know that we should be eating healthy, right? But usually there's a gap between what we know is right and what we actually do. So how do we bridge this gap? It's really about retraining the mind. And the mind learns things over time through repetition. So I really love what you said about like we're focusing on one thing at a time. And it's really about creating new neural pathways within your brain so that you want to eat healthy. And in fact, that's like your first nature now. Like you don't want that donut anymore or that Taco Bell. You want something else. And so that's really what's so important and really what Ayurveda stands for, right? Like it's about addressing the root cause, which is that we've developed an emotional dependence on an unhealthy way of eating. And that eating then impacts everything from our digestive health to our mental health to physical health, all sorts of different things. So thank you so much for sharing that. And then last but not least, we spend a lot of time talking about diet, which is amazing, a very, very powerful tool. Of course, holistic health talks about a bunch of different things as well. At Veda Warrior, we like to think about all the different weapons one has in their toolkit to kind of defeat stress, defeat anxiety, and to feel more confident, powerful, empowered. So beyond diet, what are some of the different things you're talking about to your customers in these one-on-one sessions that they can schedule with you?
Yeah. So Ayurveda, it's holistic. So we talk about everything, right? And it might seem, if you're used to going to a conventional doctor, it might seem a little invasive. But from an Ayurvedic perspective, I need to know everything to help get to the root cause. So I might ask, what is going on with your family? What is going on at work? Right? What does your bedtime routine look like? Again, I ask about their bowel movement. So it's getting really, really personal, but we need to take a look at all of these things to see what the root cause is and where we need to create these changes. So I'm trying to think if there's anything more specific that I get into, but generally the consultations, that's what they entail. I don't know if there's any specific questions also that people have had recently. It's more, I guess, a lot of people will come to me and just be like, fix me, right? But that's not what we're doing. And that's the hard thing. So I do lose clients because they have to work. I'm like, this isn't a one and done. Like, and it's not, there are coaching. I mean, there's a lot of everybody became a coach now that we're in pandemic life. So there are coaches that just want to like make money, or they're like, oh, we need to have X amount of sessions. And so when, I say we do need to have so many sessions, it's because, again, we are trying to retrain those neural pathways, because it does take that repetition and time together to get things ingrained within their body and their mind so that it becomes easier to do. So it's not just a one and done. There's effort. There might be crying. There might be discomfort. There is going to be discomfort because you are getting out of your comfort zone to make these changes that are ultimately going to make you feel better moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you just said really highlights the power of the personalization of the Ayurvedic approach. I love that you're asking people about literally everything in their life. Like, what is your relationship like? How are things going at work? Are you happy? Is this what you actually want to be doing? Because all of these impact your energy. And when your energy is impacted, then your physical health is going to be impacted as well. Your spiritual health will be impacted. So without asking all of these questions, how can we hope to heal ourselves? And again, this is very, very different from the Western model, right? Like I think most current statistics show that the average doctor spends 7 minutes with a patient. I mean, how much are you really going to figure out? So, I mean, I think there we're just focused on the symptoms, whereas this long-term, what you said, invasive, but really I would rather say thorough approach is all about just deep diving into you and understanding that you are extremely, extremely unique and special exactly the way you are. And there's always energetic things that can be designed just for you. I also love the second point you were making about the effort, right? So again, Ayurveda is this all empowering living body of knowledge. That's what I love about it so much. It puts you back into the driver's seat. So now you don't need to be waiting and to book that that doctor's appointment with the specialist. I used to be very obsessed with that, by the way. You know, I live in Manhattan. Every time something was wrong, I was like, I need to see the best doctor. Like, who do the celebrities go to? And I wasted so much money. Like, some of these cost like $500 out of pocket after insurance. And I put all of my trust into these specialists. And I would walk in and they would spend 7 minutes with me, prescribe me a prescription drug, and it just didn't work for me. And so that's kind of some of the things that I noticed as well before I just kind of moved over to this Ayurveda approach anyway. And I remember the biggest rude awakening at first was like, okay, well, I have to do all this then. So I'm going to have to make the changes. But this is why it's important to have someone like you as a resource along the way, to help you understand that habits are formed over time. And so it's not to be hard on yourself of like, oh, you know, I fell off the wagon of eating well, or you know, having my routine or whatever. It's about, you know, retraining yourself over time, slowly, with care, with love, with intention, so that you can make some of these long-term changes. So thank you so much, Angela, for being with us here today. This was a fantastic conversation. We're super honored to have you on our team as a master teacher, and we're very, very excited for our community members to get to know you better. For those of you who loved Angela's message today and want to talk to her directly, you can find her on vedawarrior.com on our experts tab, and we've posted the links below this video as well. So thank you so much, Angela, for being with us here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, and we hope to chat with you soon. So please join us for our next masterclass series soon. Thank you.